Welcome to the Aviation Black Files, the podcast where we explore the dark and intriguing world of aviation true crime. From mysterious disappearances to daring heists and untold conspiracies, we dive deep into the cases that have shaken the skies. Fasten your seatbelts and join us as we unravel the stories hidden in the clouds. This is the Aviation Black Files, your first-class ticket to the secrets of aviation's shadowy past.
Today, we're going to explore the gripping and dramatic story of the hijacking of Lufthansa Flight 181. Our story begins on October 13th, 1977. Lufthansa Flight 181, a Boeing 737-200, was on a routine flight from Palma de Mallorca in Spain to Frankfurt, Germany. The aircraft was carrying 86 passengers and 5 crew members, including Captain Jürgen Schumann and his co-pilot, Jürgen Vietor. At 11 a.m., just 30 minutes after takeoff, the routine flight turned into a nightmare. 4 armed terrorists from the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine, General Command, led by a man who called himself Captain Mata Mahmoud, hijacked the aircraft. The hijackers were armed with guns and grenades, and they quickly took control of the plane, ordering Captain Schumann to fly to several destinations across the Middle East. Captain Schumann was born in Colditz, Germany in 1940 and was 37 years old at the time of the hijacking. He was a former Luftwaffe Lockheed F-104 starfighter pilot, known for his skill and composure under pressure. Co-pilot Jürgen Vietor, 35 years old, was born in Kassel, Germany, in 1942. He was a former German Navy pilot who joined Lufthansa and had a reputation for his professionalism and calm demeanor in the cockpit. Remarkably, just 6 weeks after the hijacking, Vietor returned to work. The first aircraft he was assigned to was the Landshut, the same aircraft involved in the hijacking, which had already been repaired and returned to service. About 30 minutes into the flight, as the aircraft was overflying Marseille, it was hijacked by 4 militants calling themselves Commando Mata Halima, in honor of fellow militant Brigitte Kuhlmann, who had been killed in Operation Entebbe the previous year. The leader of the hijackers was a 23-year-old Palestinian terrorist named Zohair Yusuf Akasha, who used the alias Captain Mata Mahmoud. He was accompanied by 3 others, 24-year-old Palestinian Suhaila Saer and 2 Lebanese militants, 23-year-old Wabil Harb and 22-year-old Hind Alameh. The mastermind behind the hijacking of Lufthansa Flight 181, Zohair Yusuf Akashi, came from a family that had fled from Palestine to Lebanon, growing up in a refugee camp south of Beirut. He studied aircraft engineering at the Chelsea College of Aeronautical Engineering in London, earning his diploma in 1975. In 1972, he joined the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine, PFLP, recruited by Wadi Haddad, the co-founder of the Popular Front. Akasha joined the splinter group PFLPO. This group, with support from Libyan dictator Muammar al-Gaddafi, specialized in carrying out attacks outside the Middle East. In December 1974, Akasha attacked police officers during a peaceful pro-Palestinian demonstration in central London. Despite this, he was initially allowed to continue his studies in Great Britain without consequences. As a known PFLP activist, he was eventually expelled from the country in 1976 after serving 6 months in prison for another assault on a police officer, during which he went on a hunger strike. However, in early 1977, he managed to re-enter the UK using a fake passport. Akashi was also the main suspect in the unsolved murder of former North Yemeni head of government Qadi Abdullah al-Hagri, his wife, and a North Yemeni diplomat in London on April 10th, 1977. He left Great Britain immediately after the attack. Akashi, or Mahmoud, angrily burst into the cockpit, brandishing a fully loaded pistol. He forcibly removed co-pilot Jürgen Vietor from the cockpit, sending him to the economy class area to join the passengers and flight attendants, leaving Captain Schumann to take over the flight controls. As the other three hijackers knocked over food trays and ordered the hostages to put their hands up, Mahmoud coerced Captain Schumann to fly east to Larnaca in Cyprus. However, Captain Schumann informed him that the plane had insufficient fuel and would need to land in Rome first. Flight 181 changed course at around 14:30 and diverted eastward. It landed at Fiumicino Airport in Rome at 15:45 for refueling. Upon landing, the hijackers made their first demands, acting in concert with a Red Army faction group called the Siegfried Hausner Kommando, which had kidnapped West German industrialist Hans Martin Schleyer 5 weeks earlier. They demanded the release of 10 Red Army faction terrorists detained at the Stuttgart-Stammheim prison in Germany, plus 2 Palestinian compatriots held in Turkey, as well as $15 million. West German Interior Minister Werner Mayhofer contacted his Italian counterpart Francesco Cossiga with a bold suggestion: to prevent the aircraft from taking off by shooting out its tires. However, after consulting with his colleagues, Cossiga decided that the most desirable solution for the Italian government was to rid itself of the problem altogether. The aircraft was refueled with a full 11 tons of fuel, allowing Mahmoud to order co-pilot Vietor, who had been allowed to re-enter the cockpit at Schumann's request, to take off and fly the plane to Larnaca at 17:45 without even obtaining clearance from Rome Air Traffic Control. Flight 181 landed in Larnaca, Cyprus, at 20:28. After about an hour, a local PLO representative arrived at the airport and over the radio tried to persuade Mahmoud to release the hostages. This only provoked a furious response from Mahmoud, who started angrily screaming at him in Arabic until the PLO representative gave up and left. The aircraft was then refueled, and Captain Schumann asked air traffic control for a route to Beirut. He was told that Beirut airport was blockaded and closed to them, so Mahmoud suggested flying to Damascus instead. The Boeing 737 took off at 22:50, heading for Beirut, but was refused permission to land there at 23:01. After also being denied landing permission in Damascus at 23:14, Baghdad at 0:13 on October 14th, and Kuwait at 0:58, they flew to Bahrain. Captain Schumann was informed by a passing Qantas aircraft that Bahrain airport was also closed to them. Despite this, he radioed air traffic control and explained that they had insufficient fuel to fly elsewhere. Although initially told again that the airport was closed, he was eventually given instructions to proceed to Bahrain. The plane finally touched down in Bahrain at 1:52 on October 14th. Upon arrival, the aircraft was immediately surrounded by armed troops. Mahmoud radioed the tower, threatening to shoot co-pilot Vietor if the soldiers were not withdrawn. After a tense standoff, with Mahmoud setting a 5-minute deadline and holding a loaded pistol to Vietor's head, the troops were withdrawn. The aircraft was then refueled and took off for Dubai at 3:24. Approaching Dubai, the Boeing 737 was again denied landing permission. As they flew over Dubai airport in the early light of dawn, the hijackers and pilots saw the runway blocked with military jeeps, trucks, and fire engines. Running short of fuel, Captain Schumann told the tower air traffic controller that they were going to land anyway. As they made a low pass over the airport, the vehicles were finally being removed, and the plane landed at 5:40 local time on the airport's main runway at sunrise. In Dubai, the terrorists directed the control tower to send airport ground personnel to empty the toilet tanks, provide supplies such as food, water, medicine, and newspapers, and remove the rubbish. Captain Schumann ingeniously communicated the number and genders of the hijackers on board. He dropped different types of cigarettes onto the tarmac from the cockpit window, signaling that there were 2 male and 2 female hijackers. During an interview with journalists, Dubai's Sheikh Mohammed, who was then Minister of Defense, disclosed this information. The hijackers, likely hearing it through radio transmissions, became aware of Captain Schumann's coded message. This discovery enraged Mahmoud, prompting him to threaten Schumann's life angrily. The aircraft remained parked on the tarmac at Dubai Airport throughout Saturday, October 15th. During this time, the jet encountered technical issues with the auxiliary power unit, leaving the aircraft without an electrical generator and air conditioning. The hijackers demanded that engineers attend to the plane. By the morning of Sunday, October 16th, Mahmoud threatened to start shooting hostages unless the aircraft was refueled. Eventually, Dubai authorities acquiesced and refueled the plane. In the meantime, both Hans-Jürgen Wisniewski, the West German minister overseeing the hijacking, and Colonel Ulrich Wegener, commander of the elite German anti-terrorist squad GSG-9, had arrived in Dubai to persuade the government to allow GSG-9 commandos to storm the aircraft. Permission was eventually granted, but SAS and GSG-9 senior operatives insisted on conducting additional combat exercises and dry runs on an adjacent airstrip. Reports indicate that up to 45 hours of training took place during the Boeing 737's 80-hour stay in Dubai. Meanwhile, as Wegener weighed his options, the hijackers fully refueled the Landshut plane, and the pilots started up the engines. The jet took off at 12:19 on Sunday, October 16th, heading for Salalah and Masirah in Oman. However, permission to land was once again denied as both airports were blockaded. Riyadh also closed and blockaded its runways at 14:50 on October 16th, 3 days after the hijacking began. The plane then changed course for Aden in South Yemen, reaching the limit of its fuel range. With the plane running dangerously low on fuel, the Aden airport authorities adamantly refused to clear the runways, leaving the pilots little choice but to make a forced landing on an unpaved sand strip at 15:55. The Boeing 737 remained largely intact following the rough landing, but when the Aden authorities told the hijackers and pilots that they needed to fly away. Both pilots were concerned about the aircraft's airworthiness, deeming it unsafe to take off and fly the plane again until a thorough engineering inspection could be conducted. After engineers assured that the airframe was intact, Mahmoud permitted Captain Schumann to inspect the landing gear and engines. Schumann found that both engines had ingested a significant amount of sand and dirt at maximum reverse thrust, clogging them up. Although the landing gear hadn't collapsed, its structure was weakened, and the extension and retraction mechanism was damaged. Schumann did not immediately return to the plane after inspecting it, despite repeated threats from the hijackers to detonate the aircraft due to his absence. The reasons for his prolonged delay were unclear for many years. It wasn't until a television documentary in 2008 that the mystery was resolved. The documentary revealed that Schumann had met Sheikh Ahmed Mansour, commander of a Yemeni special unit, at the airport in Aden. Mansour explained that Schumann, deeply concerned for his passengers' safety, had insisted that the potentially damaged aircraft should not be allowed to continue its journey. After this discussion, Schumann bravely returned to the plane, where Mahmoud, enraged, forced him to kneel on the cabin floor and tragically shot him in the head before he could explain himself. At 1 a.m. on October 17th, the hijacked plane was refueled. Just over an hour later, at 2:02, co-pilot Vietos skillfully managed to take off from Aden, despite the aircraft's sluggish and precarious condition, heading towards Mogadishu, the capital of Somalia. On the morning of October 17th, Just as day was breaking at 4:34, the Landshut landed on the main runway of Mogadishu International Airport. Initially, the Somali government denied the plane permission to land, but as it entered Somali airspace, they quickly changed their minds, concerned for the safety of the passengers on board. Once the aircraft was safely parked in front of the main terminal at Mogadishu International Airport, armed Somali troops surrounded it from a distance. Tragically, the body of Schumann, which had been kept in a coat closet throughout the flight, was dumped through the rear door of the aircraft and swiftly taken away in an ambulance. Throughout the day, the hijackers requested food and medical supplies, which were approved by the Somali government. However, their demand to release the women and children on board in exchange for the supplies was turned down by the hijackers. The hijackers set a 16 o'clock deadline for the Red Army faction prisoners to be released, threatening to blow up the aircraft and pour duty-free perfume and spirits over the hostages, telling them it would make them burn better in preparation for the destruction of the aircraft, which ultimately did not occur. The hijackers were informed that the West German government had consented to release the RAF prisoners, but that their transfer to Mogadishu would take several more hours, a tactic designed to deceive them. Nevertheless, the hijackers agreed to push the deadline to 2:30 the next morning. Mahmoud, feeling confident and victorious, began to untie the hostages. Little did they know, the West German counter-terrorism unit GSG-9 was gearing up to storm the Lufthansa aircraft, planning to bring this dramatic hijacking to an end. As German Chancellor Helmut Schmidt worked to negotiate with Somali President Siad Barre from Bonn, a key team arrived in Mogadishu from Jeddah. This team included Special Envoy Hans-Jürgen Wisniewski, GSG-9 Commander Ulrich Wegener, along with his aides Dieter Fox and Officer Frieda Baum, all of whom had been closely following the hijacked aircraft. In West Germany, a team of approximately 60 GSG-9 Federal Border Guard counter-terrorism commandos consisting of 2 units as well as technicians, field telecoms engineers, and paramedics, led by Wegener's deputy commander, Klaus Blätter, had already assembled at St. Augustin Hangela and were on standby, awaiting orders. One of the GSG-9 units had already dispatched from West Germany to trail the hijacked aircraft and had landed at a NATO military base in Crete, expecting to be deployed while the 737 was in Cyprus. After Captain Schumann was shot dead in Aden, the probability of GSG-9 being deployed increased. The special teams were ordered to follow flight LH-181 on board a Boeing 707 aircraft, also operated by Lufthansa. As the GSG-9 assault team made their way toward Africa and headed toward Mogadishu, they waited in Djibouti airspace for the green light for their operation. An agreement was finally reached, clearing the way for the rescue mission. Chancellor Schmidt communicated with GSG-9 Commander Ulrich Wegener, signaling that it was time for action. The West German government not only pledged significant financial support to Somalia, but also covertly aided the regime in acquiring West German weapons for its conflict with Ethiopia. On October 17th, the aircraft carrying the GSG-9 assault team touched down at Mogadishu International Airport at 17:30, flying with all its lights off to evade detection by the hijackers. It parked approximately 2 kilometers away on the military side of the joint-use airport. Throughout the day, the Somali Air Force had been flying outdated MiGs over the airport, taking off and landing as a diversion. This clever tactic ensured that the terrorists aboard the hijacked plane remained unaware of the Boeing 707 carrying Wegener's GSG-9 team as it landed, especially since civilian traffic had been barred from Mogadishu Airport. The GSG-9 assault team relied on their Somali counterparts to create a diversion. Moments before the GSG-9 assault, Somali soldiers set off a massive explosion about 300 meters in front of the jet as a distraction tactic. This prompted Mahmoud and one of the other 3 hijackers to rush to the cockpit to observe what was happening, isolating them from the hostages in the cabin. At 0:05, GSG-9 Commander Wegener gave the order to commence the assault. A firefight lasting around 2 minutes ensued, during which the leader of the hijackers, Mahmoud, was killed appearing from the cockpit, and a young male hijacker and a female hijacker were critically wounded in the first-class aisle. The evacuation of hostages first began through the rear aircraft doors, followed by the emergency wing exits. The passengers and crew were urgently ordered and ushered to evacuate the aircraft. A few minutes later, the radios crackle in German.
Wir haben die Kontrolle über die Maschine. Keine Opfer, keine Opfer, keine Opfer, keine Opfer, keine Opfer, keine Opfer.
We have control of the machine. And then, no casualties, no casualties, no casualties, no casualties. All hostages are freed, freed.
Thank you for listening to this episode of our podcast, The Aviation Black Files. If you enjoyed our dive into the hijacking of Lufthansa Flight 181 and would like to support our work, please subscribe to our channels. This way, you'll be notified when new episodes are published. We appreciate your support and look forward to bringing you more captivating stories from history. Until next time, take care and stay curious.